Howdy, friends and floor heads. It's Friday night, and I don't have another stream till tomorrow, running Blades in the Dark tomorrow. And wife has gone out for dinner with some friends, and I said, you know what? It is long overdue for me to talk about some of the newest books from Free League for Forbidden Lands. There's the Blood March, and then there's the Book of Beasts. I am still working my way through Blood March. I will talk about it here on the channel, so you'll see that happen. But I've spent a good bit of time and I've started incorporating the Book of Beasts in my gaming. So while you're watching this, we're just in the process of getting physical fulfillments. I believe we're supposed to get it here in the next 30 to 60 days, but we've gotten the final PDFs. And I've been looking at the PDFs from the very beginning. And I hope that a lot of other companies that are producing materials, not for Forbidden Lands, but for any other game system, especially a fantasy game system, that they check out this book, because I think there's a lot to be learned from it. So it comes off initially as just a bestiary, right? A book of beasts. But you're going to see as I step through this that it's a lot more. Let's get started. All right, so we got a nice cover, and it's even got the textures on the PDF, which is nice. If you don't have any physical books from Free League, highly recommend it. The quality of the physical products are excellent. And full disclosure, I love Free League stuff, so I'm a big shill for them. We've got some really nice art, very evocative of the setting. Then we've got acknowledgments. Let's just take a quick look here. We can see, Andreas Markland is the lead writer, and good old Henrik is the lead artist again. So it's wonderful to see the beautiful, hey, Coda, beautiful artwork again. And we've got some writing from Eric Granstrom, who I've interviewed on the podcast, Tabletop Talk, if you want to hear about really the beginnings of Forbidden Lands as a setting, and Raven's Purge. We get into that in the podcast interview with him. We go to table of contents. We see on the left here, we've got, I think, like 20 some odd different new critters for Forbidden Lands. And they are, I don't love them all, but I love what they did with all of them, and we'll get into that. You'll also see some really good Game Master tools, and of course this contains solo rules for those of you who want to play Forbidden Lands as a solo game. Probably the biggest thing is in the upper right hand corner is the random encounters. I really love how they have added extra value here with random encounters. Next, we get into how to use the book. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in with our first beast. So I love the art. The art gives this game a really neat old school feel with a very modern aesthetic. We've got an amphibian as our first beast. Now, interestingly enough, it's actually not technically a beast. If you consider what monsters are in the game, amphibian is not a monster. But here's where we get to what I love about this book. And we're going to go through this through each of the monsters. I'll spend more times with some than others. I wish more companies that put out monster books helped us figure out how to use these monsters and gave us prompts and scenarios where we could use these monsters. And that's exactly what they've done in this book. So on the left-hand column here, you see a random encounter. Now, if you're familiar with Forbidden Lands has an incredible travel mechanic that involves random encounters. You can slot these random encounters into your current Forbidden Lands game, which is absolutely outstanding because we're in episode 25 now of our live stream of Forbidden Lands. And we've had a couple of the random encounters that are in the book. And as we do, I check them off, right? Because I'm not going to have the same random encounter come up again. What I've already been doing in my Foundry, which is how I run Forbidden Lands on the stream, is I've been replacing ones that we have used with some of these new ones. So if you're watching us, you may see during some of the travel, we might see some of these beasts pop up in some random encounters. Just like all of the random encounters, they're all good. Some are great. They all have a neat flexibility to them so that you can fold them into whatever overarching storyline that's in place. They never feel random, especially if you handle them correctly in the book. When you're running the game, I've got GM tips on how to run Forbidden Lands, and I talk a good bit about really how to get the most out of these random encounters, how to make them not feel random. But let's start off with this first one, which is really one of my favorites. A solitary islet emerges from the mist before you. It is barren, without any sign of a settlement, but you notice the shape of a humanoid figure with long arms leaning against a spear on a protruding rock. The creature is too far away for you to make out any facial features, but you get a bad feeling that this is it is staring straight at you. Next thing you know, the creature has vanished, and you suddenly feel very vulnerable in your humble vessel. So you'll notice the terrain type at the very bottom is lake and quagmire, so we assume we're going to be on or near water. So a patrol of belligerent amphibians have spotted the adventurer's boat, which is targeted by ramming attack according to the rules on page 9. If your adventurers make a survival roll, they can spot the swimming bodies beneath the surface. So we've got a really nice random encounter to happen if they're on some of the rivers or even in the coast of Forbidden Lands. On the right-hand side, they also give an event. Now, this event can be used either as a random encounter or something that you can inject in your game at any point in time, so outside of travel. This one has got a really nice stolen eggs plotline to it, introduces you to these amphibians, and kind of get you wrapped up into their conflict. It could even be an adventure site if you wanted to blow this out a little bit more. The other thing that we're going to get with each of these monsters is at the very bottom, and this is going to be a nice way to give a little bit of a bonus to your players that have invested in the lore skill. So they can roll lore, and based on the number of successes, 1, 2, or 3, you're going to give them some insights on this potential critter. Honestly, I wish all of the beasts, all of the monsters in the game had this. I really like this. I like rewarding lore, especially when you consider how murky the lore is based on the setting in Forbidden Lands. Oh, yeah, Rob, I agree. The egg encounter is really, really nice. So let's talk, and you can see that they even have this event as an adventure site itself, village. So we've got really these encounters are their own little adventure sites, right? I just think is absolutely, absolutely wonderful. Take a quick look at the beast, and I'm not going to do this for every single monster, but you can see here that they don't have random attacks like monsters do. A lot of the other beasts do in here. These guys are pretty good, though. They got strength 5. They have movement 2 in water versus 1 on land. Pretty decent endurance and melee skills. They've got thick frog skin, which gives them armor 2, which isn't too bad. And they've got 2 interesting things. One, they got a really nice drowning attack, which the thought of having these things ram, and I'll talk about the ram attack here in a second, ramming the boat of your players and pulling players into the water and drowning them. And if you have not encountered the drowning rules in this game, it is nasty. So these things could be a huge threat for your players. But the collective ramming attack is neat, is when a pack of these amphibians attack. You roll, if they hit the boat, you roll a d6, and on a 1 or 2, they basically just knock the boat and throw some water into it. On a 3, 4, the powerful blow throws the boat several fathoms into the air. Everyone on board must make a move roll, otherwise they are plunged in the water. And on a 5 or 6, the violent blow capsizes the boat. Everyone on board is plunged into the water and targeted by the amphibian's drowning attack. So this could be nasty. The other thing that I think is nice, and we see this for some, is a little resources section. Excuse me. So for these amphibians, amphibian eggs are not only delicious, but highly nutritious. Make them an excellent source for food. An egg is a tiny item, but can be cooked by a chef into a unit of food. The eggs can also be sold at a substantial profit. The typical rate is 5 silver coins per egg. So what we're getting for each one of these entries. Now, you can go out, for other games, we can buy, bestiary books that have hundreds of beasts in it. And some of them will have art, they'll all have stats, but I'm glad that I've only got like 25 in this book because I'm getting so much with it. I'm getting an adventure site event, I'm getting a random encounter, I'm getting a lore mechanic, and each of these beasts is a little bit different, but I really like also this resources as well. It's a way to potentially reward the players. All right, let me quickly catch up on the chat. Farkadev, yeah, solo rules. Never, I've never been a big fan of GM-less solo games, or GM games run solo. But in fairness, it's just never interested me. I've never really tried it. It might be great. I know that there's a stream, um, and I apologize, but if you search for solo Forbidden Lands, you'll find his stream. I can't think of his name. Very popular series that he did of him playing Forbidden Lands solo, and I've heard great stuff about it. I prefer RPGs that are built for solo from the ground up, like Dead Belt by a couple of Drakes. But I've heard good things about the solo rules for this game. Yeah, Tales and Techniques, the lore table is fantastic. And let's see, Coda says Forbidden Lands really makes the commitment to buff up the crafting game in Forbidden Lands. Nice. I'm excited to see that a little bit more. All right, get ready for this next one. Let's see what the heck this thing is. This is an amoeba. Okay. So let's see what the heck this amoeba is. Now, again, here's our lore roll. So on a 1, amoebas are exceptionally ravenous predators that never back down from a fight, but they can be distracted with strong smelling food. And as a GM, you know, I can have my player roll the 1 and I can just read that text to them. Or, you know, you can take your time with it and, you know, prompt your player. Say, yeah, you do kind of know something about this amoeba. Where do you think you would have learned something like this? And then work off their prompts and say, yeah, there was a song you remember that talked about some sort of amorphous predator, and that they were afraid of nothing, but were always hungry. And in this tale, a child distracts the monster with, a fresh pie or something. So you could really make this, again, not sound like you rolled a 1, here's what you get. So just think about that. Random encounter, Death in the Well. Through the trees, you glimpse a lone stone well. It is an impressive structure, likely built by the ancient dwarves, surrounded by a low wall carved with runes. An iron chain linked to a pulley is hanging down into the darkness. On closer inspection, you notice that the chain is moving. Something shapeless moves quickly towards the surface, coming straight at you. Now, if you are familiar with my videos on Forbidden Lands, you know that I have never used the italicized box text in Forbidden Lands. I've always felt, for me, that it gives up too much. It removes a little bit of agency, and it really doesn't give the type of tension that I like in my games. But I do still read it, and I still leverage it. Depending on how long your players have been in Forbidden Lands, they might see a ruined well and just a chain moving and just get the hell out, which is fine, right? That's part of Forbidden Lands. We've got a second random encounter, the Living Waste Pile. So each of one of these things can be immediately then utilized and put into your game in the random encounter table. Me, Myself, and Dies, the solo player, good show. I'd say second floor good. You're funny. Yeah, I've heard great stuff about it. All right, so that's our amoeba. Let's take a look at its attributes. Strength 18, so this thing is not easy to kill. Movement 2, armor rating none, but the amoeba only takes half damage from physical weapons and no damage at all from piercing weapons, which I think is very interesting. On the other hand, it takes double damage from fire and instinctively retreats from the adventurers carrying torches or other types of burning items. We've got, of course, resources. Let's take a quick look at some of these monster attacks. If you're not familiar with Forbidden Lands, this is a mechanic that when I first read it, the idea of random rolls for your monsters when they attack. So if you're playing any type of monster as the GM, you don't dictate their attack. You roll a d6, and every time you roll a d6, that's the attack the monster does. It threw me at first because it's so different than what I was used to. I love it because it makes it even exciting for me. And what's great is that each of these attacks, with a little bit of skill, you can weave them in and you can really make them not feel, again, random. You can make them make sense as you're playing. We got a tentacle attack, reeking cloud, acid spit, bad memories, multiple suck attack, and absorbing attack at 6. All right, let's go to our third monster. Man, that art's good. All right, a good old Basilisk, a very traditional fantasy monster. Let's look at our let's look at our 3 success lore roll. The basilisk's life force is bound to the egg from which it is hatched. Destroying the egg renders the beast harmless, and the powdered shells of basilisk eggs can be used to concoct magical elixirs. Very cool. So we've got, again, 2 random encounters here that we can incorporate for the basilisk. It's got an armor rating 8. Strength 24. This thing is nasty. Then bound life force, as we saw with the level 3 lore roll, we can see how it is tied to the large eggs. We got a potency 7 poison. If you have not encountered poison or disease, if you've not put that to your players yet, we almost killed our players not too long ago because they had a potency 11 disease, and it was pretty bad. And then, of course, the resources are the eggs. Yeah, Coda, I agree. It definitely's got that feel to it, doesn't it? Of that old, that late 70s, early 80s. Black and white. All right. Again, our monster attacks. We've got a claw attack, a peck attack, a crowing attack. The basilisk raises its hideous bird head and lets out a cacophonous crow that pierces the adventurers and makes their ears bleed. Another thing I like about the monster attacks is they don't always target strength. So very often you'll see them target some of the other attributes of your players, which is great depending on your builds because, again, it'll reward different builds, but it also makes it so your fighters and your high strength characters are at risk when they encounter monsters. Part of what I love about Forbidden Lands is the threat level that is presented anytime they are in battle. And if you play this right, if as a GM you make this very clear in session 0, it can make some really intense combat and some very clever player actions as they realize combat should be my last resort. Because I don't care what level you are, how far into this game you are, you can die in almost any combat. All right, so that's a Basilisk. Now we got this charming gentleman. So Bogman, I've told you I like the amphibian. The Basilisk is fine. I think that's a nice twist on the Basilisk theme there. I like some of it. The Bogman, I really like the encounters for Bogman. So taking a quick look at the lore 3, Bogmen are often found near powerful weapons, artifacts, and treasures, and they have been dropped into the bog as offerings to the gods. So we've got an event, so another adventure site potential with that this time being a village. I think the last one was a village as well, and then a random encounter. I'm going to go ahead and go into these because I think both of these are fantastic, and both of these have already been folded into my random encounter tables to replace ones that my players have already taken. Check out this first one. Icy veils of mist surround the area, an old bog with gnarly trees and sprawling tufts of grass that snake their way up from black ponds. Further out into the mist, you glimpse a stone wall with some buildings behind it. You see the outline of a mill and some form of watchtower. From somewhere over there, you can hear singing and music. This is fantastic stuff. But in order to get there, you must cross the bog, whose dark waters suddenly look very menacing, like an ill-conceived portal to the realm of the dead. Again, not my style. That last sentence was like, shut up. Like, shut up. Like, let them discover this stuff on their own. But the ominous bog is an old sacrificial site where the region's inhabitants have made offerings to the gods since ancient times. As the adventurers move through the bog, they will immediately be attacked by D3 bogmen rising menacingly out of the water. A good GM with a good sense of pace and tension could make that an incredibly horrifying experience. The bog is full of underwater treasures. If they decide to explore the site, the adventurers may roll D3 times in the table for valuable finds in a lair. But adventurers who stay too long will attract even more bogmen. Really, again, it's a style thing. This I hope to do because I think it's a phenomenal encounter. Random encounter, interfering worshippers. This is for marshlands, quagmire, and dark forest. The terrain is becoming increasingly wet and boggy, and the virgin forest gradually gives way to hanging mangroves and strange bushes with serpentine root systems growing out of stinking ponds. Cold veils of mist float over the bog, and you hear the call of a black-throated loon coming from somewhere ahead of you. This is, again, great stuff. Suddenly, something rises from one of the ponds. A phantom of death covered in moss and moldered leaves stretches out its gnarled arms and starts moving towards you through the treacherous terrain. Um, Fantastic, right? Totally great random encounter. Again, I would probably couch it a little bit different. I would have to adjust it depending on what my players are doing when it's rolled. But the idea of them working through a swamp or a quagmire, or if they're in a dark forest, it becoming swampy and having these things rise out of the ground, a lot of potential. They're pretty nasty too. So we talk about D3 Bogmen, you think, but that doesn't sound like a whole lot. These things are pretty bad, right? Bad for your players. So they got strength 12, movement 1. Their armor rating is none, but Bogmen are partially immaterial beings that can only be harmed by magic and magic weapons. That immediately changes everything, especially depending on your party makeup. They can be damaged by fire, though. So now suddenly that no armor rating and strength 12 is drastically changed when they figure out only be harmed by magical weapons. Now, as a GM, I start to think about, and I've done this a little bit with the ghosts, but I haven't had a full opportunity to really, describe these. That's a nice sidewinder. To really describe like how creepy this could be. So you could have as the GM, these things, the moss on the ground. You can see that that there's saturated with liquid, almost like the ground itself. It has a slight flicker and wave to it. So even though you can feel solid ground below your feet, you can tell that it's softened and saturated with water. And as you're stepping and you're getting farther along and the ground is getting swampier, you're almost seeing ripples coming off as you're stepping through. And you notice there's an area up ahead next to a rock, and the moss seems to be bubbling a little bit more than just from your steps. And it almost looks like a bubble is forming under there. And the moss that's almost now floating on the saturated ground is rising up on top of this bubble. And then you see the rusted armor. And you can just do some really kick-ass stuff with this. So I think these Bogmen are pretty cool, and they've got some very nice potential rewards available to them as well. The monster attacks, again, they're not all strength-based, and they're not all attacking strength. So here we've got a Hateful Shriek that all adventures within near range suffer a fear attack. Fear attacks are so nasty in this game. And the victims become cold, which is a nasty condition. You got a strangling attack, a drowning attack. We've already talked about that. Another thing that's nice, a mist attack. Swirling mist slithers out of the Bogman's eye sockets and settles over the adventurers like an impenetrable cloud. All the adventurers within near range suffer a -2 penalty to all attacks and combat-related rolls. The effect lasts D3 rounds. Affected adventurers must also make an endurance roll where failure renders the victim cold. Murderous Embrace, Vengeance of the Gods. An unholy glow emanates from the Bogman's eye sockets as it fills a chosen adventurer's mind with violent telepathic flashes of their own death. The victim is enveloped in a terrifying vision, and they can feel themselves being lowered into the freezing bog with their arms and legs tied to their back, to the sound of hoarse voices ecstatically evoking the gods. The victim suffers a fear attack with 10 base dice, and if it succeeds, the victim also becomes cold. This is beautiful, beautiful kindling for a GM. So this is one of my favorites in the book. Let's move to the next one. So Cockatrice, I'm guessing, right? No, Dread Raptor. A little goofy in the art, but again, I'm not going to show the art to my players. When I'm playing, I'm going to have this art up for me, and I will describe this in context, and I can make even this thing, which looks a little goofy to me, to be perfectly honest with you, I can make this even crazy and scary. I was very happy how I handled the harpies in the Forbidden Land stream that I did. I think harpies can sound very silly and goofy, but if you describe what they see, not what they think they see, if you don't describe them as harpies, but describe them as what they really are, they're actually quite horrific, and I think you can do the same thing with this. Looking very quickly at the number of the 3 hits lore roll, Dread Raptors are swift and effective killers, but dumber than giants and easily tricked into by clever adventurers. We get a feathery ambush random encounter on plains and hills, and the Horse Farmer's Revenge. A hysterical bellow echoes across, and this is for plains, hills, and forests. I actually kind of like this encounter. A hysterical bellow echoes across the landscape. It is from a group of trees a bit further away. An inconspicuous grove in the middle of the heath. The bellowing continues with increasing intensity. It is difficult to tell whether it's the sound of a brute beast or a thinking being, but there is no doubt that something is suffering out there, scared out of its wits at the very core of its being. So the bellowing creature is a terrified young horse that has been tethered to a tree at the edge of the grove to serve as bait in a trap set by some farmers from a nearby settlement. The purpose is to stop a stubborn, dread raptor that has devoured several of their horses. If they move closer, the adventurers will see the dread raptor. It too is attracted by the noise made by the poor horse. Moments later, a few arrows are fired from the bushes behind the adventurers. The arrows are clearly aimed at the killer bird, but simply bounce off its dense coat of feathers. So potentially a really, really cool encounter. Taking a quick look at it, strength 14, armor rating 3. It's got a special rule called Easily Fooled. We take a look at the monster attacks. It's got a clicking claw attack, again, a screech attack, which is another fear attack, a ram attack, a sweeping beak attack, shake attack. The Dread Raptor grabs an adventurer within near range with its massive beak and starts shaking them violently. Roll for the attack with 9 base dice and weapon damage 2 slash wounds. If successful, the adventurer is thrown in short range and lands prone. Decapitating attack. The nightmarish bird lets out a triumphant cackle and aims a powerful peck at the neck of the adventurer within near range, who the GM thinks it most resembles a well-fed horse. Roll for the attack with 10 base dice and weapon damage 2. Resources. Arrows with fletching from the plumage of the Dread Raptor give the archer modification +1/+2 against horses and mounted adversaries. An adventurer with the Boyer talent can extract enough feathers for D6 arrows from the slain Dread Raptor. Like, how cool is that, right? And this gets into what you were saying, Coda, kind of the crafting piece of it. All right, let's keep going. I hope the fact that I love this book is coming through. This next one is interesting. Beautiful art. Very, very, very interesting beast here. But this is our Gatekeeper. Now, I haven't done this with the other ones, but I think I do need to do the Gatekeeper. Let's talk about the description. So Gatekeepers are extra-dimensional creatures who, for reasons unknown, have come to the Forbidden Lands. They are strong indications that they are demonic in origin, but that classification is complicated by their burning hatred for other demons. Gatekeepers are extremely territorial beasts that jealously watch over physical locations that hold various forms of portals and passages. They are drawn to magic and non-magic passages alike, crypt entrances, cave openings, and mountain passes. Where they assert power and authority by controlling the flow of intelligent life in both directions. Demons and mistgrown are killed and devoured on sight. Other life forms are given free passage if they solve the Gatekeeper's riddle. So this is a really, really interesting critter. Very different monster than I think we've seen elsewhere in Forbidden Lands. The number 3 lower roll, Gatekeepers possess interdimensional powers that can cause mortal minds to dissolve, but the damage from their attacks can be minimized with druidic magic. This is a random encounter we might see in the stream. I've got them. So this first one, Tears in Creation. This is for so many different terrain types: plains, forest, dark forest, hills, mountains, marshlands, ruins, almost all the major ones. A blood-curdling scream echoes through the landscape. It builds into a long, anguishing crescendo. There's no doubt that it is coming from somewhere nearby. You approach cautiously through the terrain. The scream is terrible indeed, full of anguish and unspeakable torment, and yet you are not prepared for the horrific sight that meets your eyes. A grown man in armor sitting on the ground, crying like a child. He is surrounded by torn bodies in the middle of a macabre mess. In front of what looks like a maelstrom of whirling air sits a foul demon with great wings and bloody fangs. That's pretty awesome. Again, I wouldn't read this box text, but I will use this box text. And this is potentially an incredibly shocking and compelling random encounter. These gatekeepers are nasty. Strength 24, movement 2, armor rating 5, with their leathery demon skin. Telepathic challenge. All gatekeepers have telepathic powers that communicate through mental images. Anyone hoping to pass through their portals must overcome a telepathic challenge in the form of a visual riddle. In their mind's eye, the victim sees suns, moons, and other celestial bodies move among runes, shadows, and geometrical figures. They instinctively realize that there is a logic to it all, and that they will die unless they find the answer. The challenge is collective and aimed at the adventurers as a group. The adventurer with the highest wits must win an opposed roll against the gatekeeper's wits. With a druid among them, the group gives a +1 modification. If the group figures out the logic to solve the challenge, they are allowed to pass unharmed. If not, they are attacked by the gatekeeper. Now, riddles vary by group and by GM. I fall into the group that not a huge fan of riddles solved by the players. I like riddles solved by the characters. So I like to roll for it. That's just my personal preference. We can then, if they're successful, we can talk about what the riddle is and what the solution is. You can let the player that owns the character talk about what the riddle was and how they solved it. That's my preference. There's a Google D&D riddles, and you'll find a million riddles that you could use here if you wanted to. But this one is good. The other one that is really nice is the this far but no further. And essentially, and I'm not going to read it, essentially they come across the gatekeeper and there is a portal. And they have to face off with the gatekeeper. If they go through this portal, it presents a very interesting tool for you as the GM, especially if you're playing in Ravensland. You could teleport them to any hex you wanted to. So an incredible tool potentially for you to use. Some really nasty monster attacks in the random monster attacks. The resources, they are eerily perceptive beasts that can see right through the veils and lines of the world. Their eyes can therefore be used as a kind of truth-seeing artifact that always gives its bearer a D10 artifact die when using the insight skill. It's pretty cool. All right, let's talk about the next one. And we are only a third through. We're doing pretty good on time, though. This might end up being a longer stream than I expected it to be. Holy cow. How cool is that thing? Notice trees for scale. This is another one that I've already incorporated in. This is another one I really like. This is our giant specter. Giant specters are the departed souls of ancient titans. We go to the number 3 lower roll. Giant specters are under the influence of the Red Wanderer and extremely dangerous to encounter when the stars burn bright in the sky. We get a really nice adventure site and a really nice random encounter. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read them, but both of these are ones that are in my back pocket now for these players. Again, what I like is that this thing is unlike anything they've ever seen, and how they encounter it and how you unfold this beast, this monster, to your players could have an immense impact. And one of the things that I want to reinforce is, don't just say there's this huge giant specter in front of you, right? This huge ghost in front of you. A technique that I use all the time is I'll have visuals in front of me as I'm describing it to the players. Now, I used to be a GM that shared pictures, right? That I would show pictures all the time. In fact, if you go to some of my early streams, you'll see me using visuals a lot when I say, here's who you're talking to and things like that. I have moved away from that. And here's why. And this is not better or worse. This is just how I do it. But I want to explain why I've moved away from that and why I don't use visuals anymore. I've become a firm believer that there's no visual that I can put in front of a player that's going to beat what they can come up with in their head. And what I need to do is to give them enough to make that visual work in their head. So where I have found success here is having a picture like this. And depending on how this thing is revealed, spending time talking about the night sky and the stars shifting and the clouds, finding patterns in the clouds, as if you're at your campfire at night, spotting them, but then things changing and, forms going, and maybe you're half asleep. You could do so much here to describe the formation of this Titan-sized ghost. And then, after that, it gets really, really nasty. These things are really, really nasty. So you get, again, a Dark Forest encounter, as well as another adventure site. Strength 32 Giant Specter. Armor rating none. Giant Specters are undead creatures, but partially immaterial. Can only take half damage from non-magic weapons. Fire and magic deals damage as usual. Even if a Giant Specter is defeated, it will only be banished for a quarter day and then will return. The only way to truly destroy a Giant Specter is to use the Purge Undead spell with power level 3 or higher. Interesting here, controlled by Star. The Giant Specter is under the influence of the star known among the elves as the Red Wanderer. Every time the adventurers encounter a Giant Specter, the GM rolls a d6 to decide which phase the star is in and how it affects the Wraith. This is what sold me on this thing. So, especially it'd be cool if you have an elf in the party, because you can have the elf familiar with the star and talk about the phase of the star. On a 1 or 2, the Red Wanderer is in shadows, and the Giant Specter is skeptically curious about the adventurers. It only attacks in self-defense and cannot use monster attack 5 and 6 on the table. On a 3 or 4, the Red Wanderer, which is the star, is visible in the sky, and the Giant Specter is threateningly aggressive towards the adventurers, particularly any humans in the group. It attacks at the slightest provocation and can use all monster attacks. On a 5 or 6, the Red Wanderer burns with a bright glow, and the Giant Specter furiously attacks the adventurers with +1 base die to all monster attacks. Really cool stuff. We've got resources, some really, really high die attacks in its monster attacks. All right, now for something that seems very familiar for those of us that have played fantasy games. That is a big ass spider. Giant spider. Won't spend a whole lot of time here. I will tell you that I did like both random encounters. These are ones that I have incorporated in. They're not just you find a big giant spider, which I really, really liked. Something that is interesting is that you've got both the giant spider. Well, you've got the hatchlings, and then you'll notice the hatchlings have their own attacks. But then you also have and that's just encounters and everything for the hatchlings. And then you've got the giant adult spiders, and they have their own random encounters, and they're fantastic. Oh, I'm glad you like that, Wolfman. Yeah. I'm a really firm believer in this advice, and I challenge you to try it. I just have found that my players are just going to come up with something better than anything that I'm going to be able to show them. And because I'm a visual person, it helps me to have a visual in front of me as I'm describing it. But it's not uncommon for me when I'm GMing, and you might even see me do it on stream, where I'll close my eyes and visualize something in my head and describe what I'm seeing. So I'm a very visual person, but I'm finding that showing them the visuals is more limiting, and the players are able to come up with a better visual in their head, as opposed to replacing it with a visual that you throw in front of them. Now, there's a danger there, because you could have a disconnect, right? The visual that they have in their head can be different than yours, but that's why communication while you're playing is important, and checking in with them and describing things with them. And if the player says, "Hey, I thought it had this," you go, "No, it actually has this." And if that changes your decision, it's you got to keep doing that anyway, especially if you're a theater of mind GM like I am. But I've become a really firm believer in it. Very briefly, I do, and this ties to what you're talking about, that Wolfman, is a technique that that is in Brindlewood Bay by Jason Cordova, and it's something that Jason Cordova incorporates in his games and very much in his GM style. And it is a thing called paint the scene. And if you watch Blades tomorrow, you might see me try it out in Blades tomorrow. But take your time with them. Don't rush your descriptions. Slow down. That builds that tension, man. That builds that tension. But here's the paint the scene concept. And I could do a whole stream on this, so I'm not going to spend a whole time on it. But we think about, players helping, build the world, right? And a lot of times the context of it is, ask the players to describe the inn, or tell the players that there's somebody sitting at the bar and what do they look like, or what's the bartender's name? I think Jason Cordova has taken this to a whole new level. And let me see if I can come up with an example. The two of you walk into an inn. You look around. The inn's not full. It's a pretty standard. Thanks for the sub, Pumpkin Cakes. I appreciate that. And you describe like the tables and stuff like that. And which of you can tell me why you feel so uneasy in this inn? Now think about that as a prompt. I've now added a new layer. You feel uneasy, but I've allowed the players to tell me and tell us at the table why they feel uneasy. So they're going to add a critical detail to this scene now that is a very leading question for me. Another version of this is, you walk into the man's bedroom and you see that he's got the finest sheets on the bed, and the posts of this grand canopy bed are all hand carved. And you look at the furniture and you can tell all of it has been imported. What is it you see in this bedroom that tells you that he is not as rich as he's pretending to be? Like, what a great prompt for your players. So this concept is, and I don't know if it originates with Jason or not, but my first real exposure to this concept is in Brindlewood Bay with Jason Cordova's Brindlewood Bay, and he does it in his other mystery system games as well. But I am dying to try this not only in Brindlewood Bay, but I'm dying to try it in Forbidden Lands. I'm dying to try it in my Blades game tomorrow. I think there's an incredible strength here. That an incredible amount of power that you can bring to the table here that can greatly increase how invested your players will be in the world that you describe. That will, instead of telling your players you feel uneasy because of this, you're saying to them, you feel uneasy, tell me why. And then they can add a detail and never underestimate how good your players can do it. The one thing that I'm going to try to remember to do when I do this is make sure that I'm not targeting a player for this, right? I'm not putting one player on the spotlight. I'm going to try to use the language of who can tell me why, right? So that the whole table can contribute here. I have not done this yet, so I might try it and hate it and abandon it, but I've been thinking a lot about it as I've been getting ready for Brindlewood Bay in June, and I think there's a lot of power here. And don't be surprised, for those of you that watch my actual plays, if you start seeing me use that technique. Wicked left turn. Let's get back into the game. So this giant spider, we've got hatchling encounters and hatchlings. We've got adult male encounters as well as adult male stats and encounters. Oh, and Witchlight? Are you kidding me? You could do so many cool things in Witchlight. So many cool things in Witchlight with that. That's a great setting to try that out. It is a really great idea. Make sure you let me know if you try it. And then we got a monster attacks for that. And then we've got an elder female. So we're really getting three beasts here. We're getting separate random encounters for each one of them. The hatchlings, the male and the female. They've got a whole bunch of resources for them. So this is more than just your big D&D giant spider. Oh, Rob, and again, Rob, I think the potential of this thing is earth shaking, but keep in mind, I have not tried it yet. I've only been doing it in my head for about 2 months now. Yeah, if you try it, Rob, please let me know what you think. All right, so now we got a good old golem. I'll tell you, I've never been a huge golem fan, and that was before I fully understood some of the religious connotations of a golem. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I know that there's a lot of people that love golems in their games. This is a pretty typical golem, but I will tell you that both of the random encounters are excellent. This thing is a very interesting take on a golem, and I think for those of you that want a golem in your game, you have a lot of potential here. This guy I liked. So we've got an imp. And what a great picture, right? For you to visually look at as you're describing an imp. The encounters in here, check out this one. I'm not going to do both of them. These are imps. There's some, as usual, Forbidden Lands has some nice twists on imps. Buy the book, check it out. But this one encounter I think has a lot of potential. The unhappy donkey. A sad bray is heard in the distance. It is rapidly coming closer, accompanied by the sound of snapping branches and the panting of an agitated animal. This is good. Some form of large beast is clearly rushing through the vegetation, coming right at you. The source of the noise soon reveals itself. A grotesque creature with a human body and the head of a donkey, lunging at you with a shrill and hysterical bray. So now you've got like the pseudo horse minotaur thing, and your players who knows how your players are going to react to it, but check it out. The donkey-headed creature is a cursed blood mage on the run from two malevolent imps. Because of the donkey's head, he cannot speak nor use magic. Instead, he tries to hide behind the adventurers while braying and gesturing heavily. The imps come flying in hot pursuit, and they have no intention of letting their prey escape and will fight to their death unless the adventurers willingly hand over the terrified donkey creature. That's a potential phenomenal encounter. And then you're going to see, just like your typical imps, they're drawn to magic. But check out their monster attacks. Number 3, Donkey's Head. With a sinister and scornful laugh, the imp turns to the adventurer who carries the largest weapon. The adventurer hears the demonic laughter turn into the braying of a donkey, while their ears grow long and hairy. The adventurer must make an opposed roll for insight against the imp's wits. On failure, they develop a donkey's head and cannot do anything but bray hysterically. The hysteria lasts until the same point in the next round's initiative order, but the donkey head remains for a quarter day. During this time, the adventurer is unable to speak and has -3 to all rolls based on empathy. Whatever you do, don't tell them that donkey head's going away in a quarter day. Let them stew on the fact that they may forever have a donkey head, and they're playing Mork Borg now. I think that this potentially could be amazing. They have a flatulence attack, so they fart. I think this could be a very interesting monster and encounter. But this has a lot of potential. The second random encounter, also very interesting. I like the first one better. Both of these are in my random tables, so if you watch the stream, we might see that come. All right. Here we go. Now we're getting into a little bit more fantasy typical thing here. What do we got here? We've got an Iron Dragon. This guy's pretty cool. The random encounter is pretty ubiquitous. Plains, forest, dark forest, hills, mountains, ruins. I liked it. I'll use it. Nothing really to spend a whole lot of time on it, but it's a good way to get a dragon in your game. There's potential really interesting items for any smiths that you have from the resources standpoint and the crafting standpoint. Next, I love her. This is Mara. Mara is a magical being that haunts humanoid creatures in their sleep. I really need them to roll this. Linked to anxious dreams and mental torment, they mainly manifest themselves in one of two forms. One appears spontaneously in the dream, normally in the guise of a demonic cat or sexless corpse partially covered in fur. The other is summoned by dream sorcerers, which is part of Blood March, by the way. The other book that came out with this one, and can assume the form of just about anything, but its appearance is always twisted and horrifying, and summoned Maras always bear the features of the dream sorcerer that conjured it from the shadow of dreams. Now, so check this thing out. I'm not going to get into the random encounters. The random encounters are here, but check out this beast. Strength 12, armor rating none. They are immaterial, can only be hurt by magic and magical weapons. Dream attack. The Mara attacks by manifesting itself in a nightmare and straddling the sleeper's chest. It writhes, scratches, screams, and performs other types of monster attacks. See below. The Mara only attacks one person at a time, but switches targets if forced to or if the victim becomes broken. An adventurer attacked by a Mara cannot be woken or wake up on their own. However, other adventurers can attack the Mara through its shadow in the physical world. A terrifying silhouette of its demonic dream forms, frenetically assaulting the sleeping victim. God, this could be so cool and so good. Adventurers in the same room as the victim can make a wits roll once per round. On success, they wake up and realize that something is attacking their friend. This could be insane for your players. The attacks are just nasty, but man, you want to talk about paint the scene here. I mean, this could be unbelievable. You roll a random encounter, right? They go to a new hex. You roll the random encounter. They don't know if you've rolled something or not. They're kind of going through the hex, kind of going through things. Like, maybe we're okay. Maybe they make their keep the watch roll at night. Everything is going great. And then you have this attack, whoever's sleeping. And maybe the person keeping watch, maybe they notice, maybe they don't. You really have to understand what the fiction is, right? What's happening to make that decision as GM. But oh my God, this could be horrifying. And the idea of when they do find it, them seeing their friend obviously in distress, and then the moonlight, they notice the cast shadow in the moonlight of this shadow of a beast on top of them attacking them. I mean, this could be amazing. I'm hoping my players roll it because I want to run this. All right, we got another nasty beast here. This is another dragon. This one, this case, is a drake. This is more of a marshlands. It looks like we've got a couple random encounters. And yeah, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here, but cool stuff. This is more my speed. Anybody who watches me knows I love scary stuff, and undead stuff is always scary. And I love this picture. But here is a good old mummy. Now, as you can imagine, it's got a bit of a twist on mummies. Both the random encounters here are fantastic. Both of these are ones that I have already folded in, so there's a possibility that we will see these mummies play out on our game. I think it's phenomenal. They're pretty nasty, but have a lot of potential. And again, you would never call it a mummy, right, to your players. Well, hello. Look how great is this art. Look at that thing. Nature spirit. I like this one. Nature spirits are partially immaterial, parasitic creatures that have developed a symbiotic relationship with human settlements in the Forbidden Lands. They feed on the vitality of physical life forms, plants, and small animals, as well as intelligent creatures. Nature spirits have no bodies, but they are bound to physical places such as cairns, gates, or the primitive idols of hay and straw that are often found in fields around villages. This is ripe for some good stuff. They manifest themselves as twisted, vaguely humanoid figures composed of twigs, stones, ears of grain, and other material from environment around them. Oh my God, how good does that sound? So both of these random encounters are outstanding. I'll read just the first one, but I think both of these are excellent. Again, I want to run this. I want them to roll this because I want to play this. This is for Plains and Forest. The strong smell of smoke blows in across the fields. You have walked through the rolling landscape for a long time without encountering a single farmer, shepherd, or villager. But then you see the column of smoke. It rises from a place nearby out amongst the tall ears of grain. Moving closer, you hear terrifying screams and an ominous rhythmic chanting. A dozen farmers form from a nearby village are about to sacrifice a captured youngster to ensure the next year's harvest. The smoke is coming from a burning, vaguely human-like idol the farmers have made from straw and old clothes, where a famished nature spirit has its dwelling. The idol leans over the terrified victim as the farmers drag him there, eagerly invoking old gods and ancestors. The farmers will flee if the adventurers decide to attack, but the nature spirit will fight to the last straw for its promised meal. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Some really nasty monster attacks, including earthquake and elemental stuff. But that, I mean, that's creepy stuff right there, right? Cornfields, always creepy. Cultish. They think it's one thing. Again, in that box text, they talk about them immediately recognizing the idol as being, moving and things like that. I think it'd be far more interesting as the GM to present this as some sort of sacrificial scarecrow type object, right? That let your players believe, hey, this is just some deity, that effigy that they've put up there, that the real threat are these farmers that are dragging this child to sacrifice at this altar. And then the moment when this thing comes alive and attacks, maybe that's after they scare the farmers off. That could be phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. All right. There's a handsome devil. Possessor. Possessors are sheets of blood mist that take physical form by possessing other creatures. It is unclear whether the possessor is a more powerful form of a bloodling or a separate entity sprung from the same demonic gases. But there is no doubt that it is higher and more advanced life form than the primitive bloodlings, driven by a mysterious but unmistakable calculating intelligence. It prefers to possess humanoid bodies, whose physical appearance is distorted and assumes features similar to the flayed form of bloodlings, but larger, stronger, and covered in spikes and demonic armor. Like, that's some pretty cool stuff there. We get a really nice adventure site prompt. Think thick sheets of crimson mist suddenly well out of the pot and slither around the defenseless spice merchant. His rotund little body is twisted into a demonic abomination whose enormity threatens to demolish the humble trading post. Fools, surrender yourselves to the red mist, roars the abomination before launching itself at you. Really, yeah, good point, Coda. Could be anything humanoid, right? That could be awesome. Trading post that they come across. Really neat little adventure site. They trade. Let them get comfortable, right? Finally, like they can spend some of this gold that they have been finding, and like they can beef up on supplies. And one of the trading posts, they've got the spice merchant, who's, everybody says, is just a little strange. And you could make, you could spend some time role playing it and even make them a kind of an NPC. They might even fall in love with a real character, and then he turns into this possessor. A lot of potential here, but creepy ass shit, which I love. Part of what I really enjoy here in the Forbidden Lands. Okay, look at this lovely, lovely person. We're just over halfway through. I'm going to speed things up just a little bit because I think I'm getting my point across. We've got a Rat King. I will tell you, I won't get into it. I think both of these random encounters are excellent, and they're nice twists on what we normally think of with rat encounters in fantasy. And with Rat Kings, that's nothing new to fantasy. They both have some very interesting twists to it. The Rat King itself is very, very interesting as well. So this is good stuff. I have no interest in this type of encounter in most fantasy games. I will definitely use the Rat King in this setting. We've got this lovely gentleman here, a rock troll. With the rock troll, we get an event, which means another adventure site village, as well as a random encounter that's good in the forests and the hills. Armor rating 8. That's nasty. It's got to regenerate, sensitive to sunlight, so very troll-like in that respect, which is good. These guys are pretty cool. Shapeshifters, which if handled right by as a GM, has tremendous potential. I liked both the event adventure site and the random encounter. So if and when you get the book, make sure you check these things out. There is a lot of potential here for you as a GM. I think that these are very, very interesting beasts to play with. Make sure you spend time reading their special abilities, their mimicked life form, and really spend some time understanding the monster attacks before you run this because they're a little bit different. And again, if you're familiar with these monster attacks, you have the potential of making them horrifying when they get rolled. Good old centipede. A scolopendra. Where do we encounter these things? They are encountered in dungeons. Oh, adventure site dungeon. Nice. And then terrain types, plains, hills, forest. I remember being fine with this when I read it. I was like, yeah, I'd use this. Nothing really got me too excited about them, but they're nasty. And to be honest with you, like, this thing is cool. The problem is that there's so much cool in this book that it's a little overshadowed. Like, I mean, I was kind of throwing away about the spiders. Go back and read the different spider encounters for the male spider, the female spider, and the hatchlings. They're phenomenal encounters, and they're horrifying monsters. But there's just so much good stuff in here, and that we don't want to make this a 3-hour stream. Oh, this can't be good. The Swarming Death. The Swarming Death is an all-consuming cloud of flesh-eating locusts, yes please, and other insects that plagues the Forbidden Lands on a regular basis. The phenomenon seems to have been in connection with the western wind and the unknown lands beyond the mountains. So that's getting into the Blood March. Some say it originated in faraway Dragaland. Others point to its kinship with the insectoids and their rapid expansion through the underground realms. A third theory, popular among sorcerers, is that the death swarms come from the plains beyond the Demon Gate in Shadowgate Pass. Whatever the case may be, there is no doubt that the insect clouds follow their own merciless logic as they sweep through the lands like the cold breath of death itself. We get 2 pretty cool and pretty nasty random encounters in here. Again, in the right hands with the right GM, these things could be horrifying and super creepy and very tone setting for your players. Because again, these things are very different than what they've encountered probably in the Forbidden Lands so far. Kind of a goofy picture, but I kind of dug this thing, the Tupalak. I will use both of the adventure sites as well as these random encounters. I think that these are both excellent. The beast is very interesting. It's kind of this weird undead critter. Definitely check it out. This guy, notice to the far right here for scale, a twisted ent. Not my favorite, but one of my top 5 in this book. And it is because I think both of these random encounters are phenomenal. I think they're both extremely interesting. I think they have more than just one single layer to them. Check this thing out. It's very, very interesting. This is one of my top 5 in the book, the Twisted Ent. It's pretty. Okay, we got an undead dragon. My players are a little dragon shy right now, so I can't remember. I honestly don't remember if I've got any of these dragons teed up in Foundry for them to encounter or not. I do need to go ahead and flesh out some of these adventure sites, though, because I want to put some of these adventure sites on the map, because I think a lot of these things have some really interesting potential, like that trading post that we talked about with that Blood Mist monster. Pretty cool dragon, actually. There's some things that make it pretty interesting. Both of these random encounters could be horrifying. Both of them could be very deadly. You'll notice this thing has a strength 48, without an armor rating, but since they are essentially skeletons, stabbing weapons can never inflict more than 1 point of damage on a single attack. Undead dragons take half damage from other physical attacks. So suddenly that strength 48 becomes like strength 100, and that's pretty gross. And of course, some really nasty monster attacks. That's a cool picture. Good old Vampire. Now, I liked the random encounter for this a little bit better than I did the village, but I think the village, the event, village event here has a lot of potential. I would make some changes to it, but read it. I think there's some good things there for you. Coded. What did I just see here? Dying Vampire last session, the heart they won is going to lead to some bad nightmares. Oh, that's so cool that you used it. Oh, that's so cool that you used it. So you used that random encounter. Very nice. All right, we've got this lovely gentleman here. That's our water troll. That's pretty cool. Good old will-o-wisp. And I can tell you right now, I used to get a ton of mileage from will-o-wisps in a more traditional fantasy game. They are horrifying legendary creatures, and they really lean into it here with these guys in Forbidden Lands, which shouldn't shock you. These things are nasty, and both of these random encounters are excellent, especially if you've never called them will-o-wisps in the entire encounter. They become super creepy if you don't call them will-o-wisps, which you really aren't going to see me do a whole lot of. You don't hear me call trolls or ogres very often. Well, we know what that is. That's a type of wolf. Their twist on werewolves, a wolf shadow. Pretty cool monster. I liked how they handled lycanthropy in here. I think that the random encounter is excellent. I think I would use the event, but honestly, I don't remember it off the top of my head, and I'm not going to read it. I thought the monster attacks were very interesting. This thing has a huge potential campaign impact because of the lycanthropy, so definitely check it out. All right, so there's all our critters. Phenomenal list of beasts. You get so much with each of those beasts. Well worth it. But here we get into the random encounters. It gives you a table breakdown where you can roll just for these beasts if you wanted, but consider doing what I did, which is you've got this chart, which lines up directly to the chart you're using for Raven's Purge or using in the base book, right? And you can just swap it out. So if they've already used 34 for forest, then replace it with one of the forest encounters that you have here. And this chart makes it very easy for you to track it down. And each of these random encounters, you've got brand new ones in here. So you not only get the random encounters before, but you've got all of these new random encounters. I mean, this is more than you could have asked for in this book of beasts. So we've got now a total of, let me scroll down here. God, this is more than I remembered. 36 brand new random encounters that you can swap in here. Some of them use some of these beasts. Some of them are brand new. They're all really good. You can tell how the writers are learning. And I think the base random encounters in Raven's Purge and in the GM's guide are phenomenal. Some of these are really, really good. Take your time and go through them and swap them in. So even if you don't take the effort of swapping in from the monsters, these are worth looking at. The Game Master tools that are in here, we've got a nice section on traps, which many considered a huge gap in the original game. I didn't. I'm not a huge trap guy. But now you've got some nice references for traps. Books, ballads, and grimoires. Just a ton of value in this book. Oh, I thought this was nice in the journey section. In this section, you will find random tables that can add more life and detail to the adventurer's journeys in Ravensland and elsewhere. Whenever an adventurer reaches a new hexagon on the map, you can roll on the table below to get a feel for the area. Each terrain type has a separate table. I thought this was great to have as a resource as you go through. I'll be anxious to see if this gets incorporated in the Foundry implementation, because it'd be really nice as they go to a new hex, if there'd be a way for me to have it naturally generate this prompt for me as a GM. But man, there's a lot in this book. What page are we on here? This is page 148. So all these nice descriptions. Listed below, description of typical campsites for each terrain type. Roll on the table and the adventurers make camp to see what they find. Like, how great is this? Roll a d6. They're in the plains. They roll a d6. You find a vast hollow that provides shelter near the ground, enough for a night or two. So now we can add some variety to when they make camp rolls, and give them kind of a sense of where they're making camp. We're adding a whole another little layer to it. Enough of a prompt where they can build a scene, they can paint the scene for it. Really, really small touch, but I think incredibly valuable. I will be using this. More rules on strongholds. I haven't really gotten into strongholds. I love that they exist. I'm not sure what interest level I have in them. I'm not sure what interest level my players have in them, but a phenomenal second game that can be played within that. Whole bunch of things on potions and poisons. So really some of the gaps that were being called out in this game are being filled just by this book. More artifacts. And tools for making artifacts, which I really liked. Like, here's just a way to generate and create an artifact on the fly. Some really nice tables with the artifacts oddity. And then here's our solar rules, which I have not read, but I hear good stuff about it. Is that the end? That is the end. Nice reference in the back to be able to quickly find the descriptions for each of the beasts. All right, that's it. If you're playing Forbidden Lands, you got to get this book. It's really, really good. I have been going through Blood March, which is a whole new adventure set like Raven's Purge and Bitter Reach. It has new magic in it, new classes in there. It is very different than Raven's Purge, and it's very different than Bitter Reach. And I think in some ways it is more sophisticated than both of them. So again, we're seeing the creators behind this stuff learning and getting better at it. One of the things that I really found interesting in the Blood March is I think the quality of the legends is much better. As you may or may not know, I don't use the legends in the book. I don't like them. I think they tip the hat too much. The other thing they did a really nice job with in Blood March is they did a really good job coming up with even more compelling things to dangle in front of your players to get them to come to adventure sites. So I think that you'll find yourself using in the Blood March a lot more of those pre-encounters that point towards the adventure site. And I will do a similar stream as this. Probably have to be multiple streams as I spend more time with Blood March. All right. Can't thank you guys enough for watching, guys and gals that were in the chat. I couldn't keep up with it. Love that you guys are talking in there and conversing with each other. This was a real pleasure. Tomorrow morning, depending on where you are, at 11 a.m. Eastern, it could be the season 2 finale of Blades in the Dark. We have to see what happens. I have got a really nasty, or nasty is not the right word. I've got a really interesting surprise for our players for this score. They have picked a very risky score, and I'm going to make them pay for that risky score. So make sure you check it out if you haven't watched any of that. And then I think in 2 weeks is when we come back to Forbidden Lands for episode 25. I guess that's it. I appreciate everybody sticking by. Let's go to credits. Howdy friends, thank you for watching. All our content is archived and organized in playlists on the Third Floor Wars YouTube channel. Check it out. And if you could like, follow, subscribe, and even set your notifications to this channel on YouTube and Twitch, we'd appreciate it, and it'll make sure that you catch all of our content. I talk with creators, designers, and experts across the gaming landscape in every episode of our podcast, Tabletop Talk. Open up your favorite podcatcher and search for Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. Support your creators. They make the content you love, and it's your support that makes it happen. If you want to help us, go to Third Floor Wars on patreon.com, and you can help us for as little as $1 a month. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. Take care.